open up in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another opportunity to exercise our rights, dear Lord. I pray that this meeting is productive, dear Lord, that we learn something that we can use, that we are set on fire to community activism, to get people out to vote, and that we all leave with information that we can use. Thank you for this time and this place. Amen.
Amen.
So please be sure to provide us with that information. There's a lot of information coming out. I'm not going to, we were blessed to have, one of the things that I wanted to do was have all the gubernatorial candidates come and address us. And we are blessed to have, and I always call, I always want to pronounce, because I'm stubborn like that, Krish's full name. I never quite do it. I always want to pronounce it, it's a, I'm sure that she experiences the same thing I do, as far as my name being Sweeting, so it's Sweetie, and all different kind of things. And then I always get how sweet a name I have and all this kind of stuff. So I'm sure that she experiences the same kind of thing. But the thing that fascinates me about 2018 is all the women that are running for office. All right, and the thing that really fascinates me about, because hey, I've got two girls, and I'm not really trying to, be sexist or whatever. I think my daughters can do it. And can't anybody tell me what my daughters can't do.
That's right.
All right? I mean, nobody can tell me what they can't do. All right? Because then I'm the bull in the china shop, because they can do anything that they set their minds to. But I realize that being a woman is a unique situation, although I never will have that experience. Okay? So, it's kind of funny, People ask you what it's like being black. I can't really explain it, okay? And I'm sure that women, what's it like being a woman, I will never know. All right? I can empathize, I can sympathize, I can do all kinds of things, but I will never know. But I also know that my observations that some things, I'm going to say required, but sometimes we ask things of women, and particularly women in politics, women candidates, but we don't ask of men. All right?
Hallelujah.
All right? How they dress, how they look, are they, too assertive? Are they not, are they modest? All this kind of stuff, which I don't know if I can say it's not fair. I studied history a lot, and I just like reading about wars. And I spent a lot of time reading about World War II, particularly the Soviet Union and World War II and the Eastern Front, because they had a lot of female soldiers. And even back then, the words were that the female soldiers were more efficient than the male soldiers were. And I believe that. So I think that we're all equal, but I wanted to have this particular woman come and address you today, and for us to not only see her candidacy, but I wouldn't say that about any of the men. So I want you to embrace all the candidacies. So we're going to have Krish. She's going to tell me how to pronounce it. That's what happens when you're late. We're going to have Krish come up and tell you about what she's doing, what her candidacy, and what she sees the future of Maryland. And I want you guys really to kind of, pinch in, not only give her a welcome, but I don't want your involvement with any of these people's campaign. Any people that take time to come to us, your involvement should not end when they leave, okay? So I pray that not only, I know that you guys are a nice, receptive, and kind audience, I know that, but I pray that we're also a consistent audience or a determined audience, and so that we stay and work with these candidates and support them. It's not easy running for office. It's a politics is a professional sport. You take all kind of hits, and you got to get back up, and you got to have a lot of patience. So without further ado, we're going to invite our candidate, Krish, to come on up and introduce herself and say whatever she wants to say, for however long she wants to say.
Great. So, first and foremost, I know it was a foggy evening. It's not the 70 or 77 that we're going to have in the next couple of days. So I do appreciate you all coming out. It really does mean a lot to me. And it was really wonderful to actually see what you guys are doing in terms of studying how we hold our politicians accountable. Because the transparency that, you know, I know we were just talking about is exactly what we need to do with politicians right now. Because there's a heck of a lot going wrong, and we need to make sure we make it right. So, a little bit about me. My name is Krish Vignarajah. I'm running for governor as the only female candidate in the field against 7 men at a time when out of 14 federal and statewide offices, so that's 8 congressmen, 2 senators, the Attorney General, Comptroller, Lieutenant Governor, and Governor, all 14 of those positions are filled by men. Not a single woman representing us at the federal or statewide level. And sadly enough, in Maryland, we have never had a female governor. And sadly enough for the Democratic Party, we have never had a woman of color be governor. By contrast to the Republicans, who have actually had 2, in Nikki Haley and Susanna Martinez. So oddly enough, Democrats are a little bit further behind the Republicans. And we're going to change that. And we're going to change that this year. Because 2017 should have been the year of the woman, and 2016 should have been the year of the woman. 2015, I mean, heck, decades ago it should have been the year of the woman. But we're going to make sure that we send a message, not here in state, but across the country, that with Donald Trump in the White House, we're not sitting down anymore. We're standing up and we're fighting back. And so for me, I want to talk for a few minutes really about a little bit of my background, what I'm about, but I want this to be a conversation. And, you know, as just described, I want this to be the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it. So I was 9 months when my parents actually fled a civil war and came to America. We were actually going to move to Nigeria, northern Nigeria, that actually my parents had their bags packed to go. When, lo and behold, we hit the jackpot and we were allowed to come to America. I realized that today, it may not have been the case that we would have been able to come into Donald Trump's America. And that's in small part why I'm running. Because I know what America has always represented to many of us. And here in Maryland, that was the land, it was the land of opportunity for my family. My parents came, no jobs, $200 in their pockets, 2 very young kids in their arms. Benson High, went to Frederick Douglass, went to Southern before it became Digital Harbor. Then he finally retired from Western, the oldest all-girls public school in Baltimore City. He retired at 80, not a spring chicken. After 37 years of teaching in the Baltimore City school system, over 50 years of teaching. And so I can tell you that being the daughter of educators, I was very lucky that at an early age, I realized that, you know, when we grew up in this basement apartment in Edmondson Heights, right on the Baltimore County city line. And we had a community there. We didn't have wealth. We didn't have access to politics and privilege or anything like that. But we had a community there that banded around us. And so when my parents needed to go for a job interview or they needed to run an errand and they couldn't afford to take care of us in the sense of having a babysitter, they entrusted us to our neighbors. And our neighbors were not just our neighbors, they were our family. And that was the Maryland I grew up in. And right now, at a time when there is chaos at the national level, and there are so many things wrong because of everything happening with Trump in his White House, and Congressman Harris, and Larry Hogan, when we should be talking about how we take care of ourselves, what we hear from Annapolis is silence. And I want to make sure we change that. Because what I love is these kinds of meetings. Because I think Donald Trump thought that we were going to let him take America in a wrong direction. And what I have seen when I've crisscrossed this state, whether it is Garrett County, Harford County, Baltimore City, Ocean City, people are not going to stand up and sit down. They're going to stand up and fight back. And so for me, what I'm trying to do is put forth an affirmative, positive agenda of what we can do. For me, that's been focused on education, revitalizing our economy, protecting our environment, and supporting working families. Whether that is the tax bill, health care, the fact that I crisscross the state and people talk to me about how their families are going bankrupt, how they were stuck in a dead-end job because of health care. Health care is a human right. No one should be questioning whether they're going to be able to get the basic services they need to take care of themselves and their family. And yet, that seems to be in debate. I want to make sure as governor we guarantee universal access to quality health care. But I also want to make sure that when it comes to education, look, I am not the daughter of politics and privilege. I am the daughter of public school teachers. And I will tell you that there's a lot of politicians that look at public education and they think of it as a line item on a budget. It is a springboard of opportunity. I wouldn't have gotten the chance to work as Michelle Obama's policy director in the White House, except for the education I got here. I wouldn't have had the chance to work for Hillary Clinton, except for the education I got here. I wouldn't have had the chance to be a lawyer, to be in business, to start my own small company, except for the education I got here. Every kid wants that basic opportunity. Every parent wants that opportunity. Who here is a parent? Okay. So you feel the pain that I feel. When I brought my daughter into this world this past June, she's now 8 months old. And so sometimes people say to me, speaking of sort of the trials and tribulations of running as a woman, sometimes people say to me, well, no, you need to drop out. You need to stay at home and take care of your daughter. And my response is, I am taking care of my daughter by making sure that the world she is living in is better than the world she was born into. Because I know every parent wants that for their child. And we're not delivering that. But we can change that. And that's where I think we have an opportunity. So if you believe that the status quo is good enough, if you're happy with that, then I'm not your candidate. You probably should vote for one of the electeds, one of the establishment candidates. If you want to blow up the system, I think there's a lot of ways we need to revolutionize what we're doing. But if you want to blow up the system, I'm probably not your candidate. But if you're part of that moderate majority that believes that Maryland could finally see its renaissance, if you're sick of politicians promising you the moon and stars and not delivering a single thing, then you know my plight. Because growing up, when my parents would come back and they would say, well, no, the politicians have promised help is on the way. We got nothing. Right? We had our neighbors, we had our family, and that's all we had. But now, we have an opportunity. Because though we may never say, oh, Donald Trump got elected, thank goodness for that, I have never seen people more mobilized than I've seen them today. And that's where I'm excited. Because we can make sure that we touch and reach out to every Democrat out there who feels like they've been taken for granted. But I want to do more than that. I want to make sure we reach out to probably a lot of your neighbors here in Harford County, right? Who feel like, well, they've been lifelong Republicans, but Donald Trump's not the Republican Party that they represent, right? And that's where I think we could reach out to them too. But we've got to do it by setting forth a vision. Setting forth a vision of how we're going to pay to take care of our kids, how we're going to make sure that they have a good education. When they come out of school, that they're either career ready or college ready. That when they come out of school, that they actually have a job in their neighborhood. Because time and time again, I hear people telling me, parents who break my heart when they say, my kid has to move out of our community because there's no job here. No child should have to do that. No parent should have to lose their child because of that. And yet on a range of issues, we're seeing a stagnation, a calcification of our party and our community. We got to change that. We got to shake things up, and we can do that right now. And so I'm going to end with, because I want you to ask me about the questions that you're thinking about. But I want to end with how we do it. Because right now, I think a lot of people believe that, Larry Hogan, he's popular. Second most popular governor in the country, right? But exactly. But if you talk to people, if you talk about how our schools have gone from 1st to 6th, the fact that we get a B- in a state like Maryland, if you talk about the fact that right now our unemployment rate is between 18th and 25th. If you took out the federal jobs from our state, we'd have the worst unemployment rate in the country. If you talk about the fact that families are going bankrupt because no one is taking care of the health care that they need. If you talk about the fact that tax bills are going to go up and politicians are not addressing the fact that here in Maryland, we're going to get hit, and we're going to get hit hard, then you realize that we have an opportunity. But what we need to do is we need to mobilize our base. Because in 2014, we had 296,000 Democrats not show up. And who were they? Women, minorities, immigrants, and younger voters 18 to 29. And so when people approached me, because I will tell you, I had never planned on running for politics. I had always been more focused on just getting things done. And so when I had the honor of a lifetime to work for the Obamas, for me, I was focused on how do we use the 8 years we have to get things done. And we did it. And yet, within a year now, we have a president who has been reversing and threatening to reverse things, not because he disagrees with the policies, but petty politics. That's what we gotta get rid of. We gotta stop that. We gotta change the discourse. We gotta stop the finger pointing, and we gotta just get folks like us to be elected. Because if we're gonna save democracy, we gotta elect more Democrats. If we're gonna get more Democrats elected, we gotta make sure our electeds look more like us. Like the folks in this room. Because that's how we're gonna have people address the problems that we face day to day. I remember the struggles when my parents, when we were living as a family of four on our one teacher salary. We would have to, kind of just figure out how we could save $20 per week for groceries for a family of four. And we got by, but we were living paycheck to paycheck with no room for error. And still today, decades later, we're still struggling. But that's where we can change that. In a state like Maryland, we could make sure we have one of the most vibrant economies in the world. We've got proximity. We've got human talent. We've got infrastructure. We've got world-class universities. We've got federal institutions. We've got a private sector that is struggling, but if we give them a little bit of help, no one wants handouts. They just want an ability to be able to compete on an equal playing field. If we give them a little help, the world is our oyster. And that is what I am fighting for. And I hope you join me, because we can do it. We can get all those demographics to show up, because what we are talking about, what my campaign is about the people. It's about taking this moment and building a movement. And that's where I need your help. I need you to join me in terms of the ideas that you have. I need you to join me in terms of getting the word out. I need you to join me in terms of going door to door, because when I did it in Annapolis and Frederick, and I've been doing it in Montgomery County, people are still not paying attention. But when we talk to the voters, when we talk to them about the problems under Larry Hogan, they get it. They realize the wrong direction we're headed in, and they're gonna join us. But we need to all reach out. Because right now, it's an echo chamber. I think we all agree that Larry Hogan's gotta go, right?
Yes.
But we gotta make sure that our neighbors hear that message too. And that's a message that will resonate, but we gotta make the pitch, and we can do it. So I hope you'll join me, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you. All right, questions? I know you're not a shy bunch. I heard y'all before.
Do you have the finances to take them on?
Yeah, I mean, so we, so admittedly, we are in a, the position of being the last candidate in the field, right? So I launched in September.
At the last,
Last campaign to launch
To
in
get in.
September. Yep. And so what we have done is had one of the highest fundraising rates in the field, and by far the lowest spend rate. So the guys in the field have spent between 47 and 99% of what they've raised. So I actually tweeted this phrase my mom would always have the saying: if you want your money managed well, give it to a woman. And if you want to know how I will run my campaign, it is very much how we have run my administration. It's very much how we run our campaign. And so we've been very judicious, and frankly, we are competitive with every single Democratic candidate. Don't get me wrong, when we go into the general, we're all gonna have to get up and kind of get involved in the fundraising effort, because right now, Larry Hogan, as you all heard before, has been getting finances from all sorts of kind of the worst actors. But I think we can do it, because Maryland's gonna be one of the frontline states against, kind of the Republican Party and the White House, which is why it's actually been somewhat tickling the number of times the Republican Party, so the Republican Governors Association and the Republican National Committee, the RNC, basically every week, every other week, come after me for something or another. And I realize we're threatening, because I think they realize that we have a message that is resonating. In our first 24 hours, we got more social media attention than the entire field, because this is where maybe I hope the Obamas rubbed off on me, but I think we have an authentic message, that it speaks to people because it's the experience of people. And that's where I think that we have an opportunity to not just reach voters across this state who are just fed up with the same old politics, but also across this nation, who believe that Maryland could be leading the charge against the nonsense happening at the national level. And that's where we're going to be tapping into. I know there's gonna be this Janus decision, and we've been very supportive of AFSCME. I will tell you this is personal in the sense that my father was a lifelong member of the AFL-CIO and then BTU. And so I know personally what collective bargaining meant for our family. It is the difference between being able to get by and really going into poverty.
Yeah, there's a bill in Annapolis right now for collective bargaining for the deputy sheriffs in Harford County. That bill's there now, and we hope to get it passed.
Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense. Yeah.
Good.
Other questions?
They're all stunned. You did such a good job.
Oh, come on now. All right,
Higher education for your children like in high school. My nieces live in North Carolina, and they have a program called Early College. And so in high school, when they enter high school, they actually take college courses, and by the time they graduate high school, they go one additional year, they graduate not only with their high school diploma, but with an AA degree.
Yeah, it's so smart.
So one of the things that I'd like to see in the state of Maryland is to give opportunities for those children. I mean, I know we have 2 children in private colleges that is, you know, it's burning our pockets up.
Yeah.
But if we had the opportunity for them to go into that type of, you know, opportunity, it would reduce how much we were spending out of our pocket.
Yeah, no, completely. So this is where, you know, for me, at Woodlawn High School, so where I went to school, they didn't have this when I was going through school, but when I went back to talk to the kids a couple months ago, and there's now a program where you can graduate with your AA, you realize this is the direction we have to head for all schools across the state, because the reality is that right now, a high school degree in many cases is just not enough. You have, the baseline has to be an AA degree, which is in part why one of the things that I want to see is free community college across the state.
Yes.
As your governor, I promise I will guarantee it. But part of it is also, you know, for me, it's that holistic approach, right? So from cradle to career, I want to make sure that every Maryland child is coming out of school either career ready or college ready. Because I will tell you, and my father would be the first one to say this, that some kids are not going to go to school.
Right.
And that's all right too. But we got to make sure that they have the vocational training, because whether they become a plumber or an electrician, my cousin's an electrician, he gets a great, you know, income. We don't need to stigmatize that. We need to highlight that that is a great way that they can go. But what I also want to see is that we provide free technical education, free job retraining, and apprenticeships. Earlier today, I was in Annapolis talking to young Democrats, and I asked them how many kids had been a participant in an apprenticeship. Not a single hand was raised. And that's where you realize we are not preparing our kids for the economy that exists. But likewise, when I talk to business folks, they say to me, we have jobs for machinists and welders. We don't have the kids who have those skill sets. And so they end up looking at other states to see if they can get them to come in here. That's nonsense. Our kids can, of course, take those jobs on. But we got to give them the skills. And that's where I also just think that, you know, we need to also figure out how we're doing on education. Because right now, so Joe Biden had this Uncle Joe. We all miss Uncle Joe just as much as we miss the Obamas, right? But Biden would always say, if you want to know your values, look at your budget. In Maryland, we have a 1950s budget in many ways. We spend as much on prisons and policing as we do on higher education. That's in part why school's so expensive here. We spend 4 times as much on 4-year colleges than on 2-year colleges, even though there are 200,000 more Marylanders who are either in continuing education or certificates in community colleges. And that's where we need to start making those investments, because we know that they pay dividends. And so part of my point with free community colleges, let the kids get those 2 years, and then we can figure out a way to get the other 2 years paid for, right? Because there's right, absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, I just had a question because my children just graduated, oh, thank God, from college. We tried really hard to get them into University of Maryland. And it just seems to me that there's a very limited number of seats that go to Marylanders when, you know, my tax money subsidizes that. My son couldn't get in, my daughter could never, we didn't even apply. But, you know, kids from Jersey and from all over, the country are going there.
Oh, yeah.
What would you do about
They
that?
Well, I
pay,
mean,
they
this-
pay more money.
See, yeah, they pay more money, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
why.
and
That's
that's,
what they want.
yeah, I mean, but that's where we know as parents, it doesn't simply boil down to the dollars and cents. We gotta make sure if we are subsidizing, these schools as we are, that our kids have a fighting chance to go to them, because also candidly, we shouldn't be shipping our kids to other states because they can't afford the schools that are right here at home. So that's where I wanna make sure that our kids have a competitive advantage to come in state, because other states do it. We just don't, right? And that's where, I wanted to just lay out, in terms of education, for me, it is cradle to career, right? How do we guarantee, so for me, my policies are, I wanna invest in universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds. Because in a state like Maryland, we still have 4-year-olds who are locked out of that basic building block that allows them to have a fighting chance. But I also want to fix the funding inequities and rebuild our crumbling schools, because I will tell you that there are literally cracks in the infrastructure of our schools right now. I had to live through sweltering heat, and we saw the headlines of freezing cold, that our kids in Baltimore are huddling. But that's not news to us. I had friends from across the country being like, how is that happening? I was like, we don't invest in our schools. But it's also about making sure that we invest in science, technology, engineering, and math, but also civics education. November wouldn't have happened if we didn't teach our kids what it is to be citizens. But then I also want to make sure that we're providing hot and healthy breakfasts and lunches. Because Michelle Obama, if there was anything she taught me taught me a heck of a lot. But one of the basic fundamental things that I think we all know is that no child can give their teacher their full attention on an empty stomach. It's just not going to happen, right? And that's where it's just these small but sound investments pay such a return that it should be a no-brainer, and yet our politicians are not doing that. And then I guess the only other note I would just touch on is this.
Take all the time you want.
I'm sorry. I got a lot to say, I'm sorry. But the school shootings, right? I mean, the fact that there is a phrase of school shooting, the fact that this guy Cruz in Florida wanted to be a professional school shooter, that's where we are in America, right? We have had 17 or 18 school shootings, and it is mid-February. Come on now. Our children should not be in these kinds of environments where as parents or grandparents, we wonder whether at the end of the day we will see them or not. And yet that is a sad reality that we face. And that's where in Maryland, we should be leading the charge. And yet our governor has sat silent and said nothing. And so part of what I want to do is make sure that we address the fact that half of the guns that are confiscated here in Maryland come across our borders. That's a role that the governor has to play. That's a role I will play. I want to also make sure we restart the Baltimore gun buyback program. I want to make sure that we invest in the Operation Safe Kids program that we have, that Governor Hogan cut the entire funding for. Operation Safe Streets. We've seen that in the 4 areas that operates, crime has been reduced by more than 50%. And yet it only exists in 4 small districts. The funding for that program, when I'm governor, will be quadrupled. I want to make sure that we are actually guaranteeing that every gun in state is licensed. But more than that, I want to think creatively. If you can drive a car and have to pay for insurance, when you buy a gun, shouldn't you have to insure it too?
Right.
And yet no one's talking about that. But likewise, I want to make sure that we have stricter background checks, but also that we address mental health. Because right now, we don't talk about mental health, and that is a problem across the board on a range of issues. When we talk about, our war on crime, who are we kidding? It is a failing war, because we're not addressing the root causes. When you talk about crime, crime is an issue of public health, education, opportunity, for starters. And that's where we need to address the fact that mass incarceration isn't working. And that's where our moral and our monetary interests align, because it's not the right thing to do. It's also a stupid way to spend our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Because right now, to put a person in prison, $38,000 a year. For most of those folks, we need to be talking about treatment. Only 1 in 10 people gets the treatment they need. And that's where we could be saving $5,000 to $10,000 is how much you need to treat these people. That's a public health issue, and we're not addressing it. And then the final point I want to make is that we got to address this school-to-prison pipeline, because there are problems with how we approach kids who, they act out because they want attention. And instead of attending to them, we just put them on this track that they're heading to prison, and that makes no sense at all. And that's where we need to change the conversation. We need to make sure that when we say help is on the way, we deliver. And that's where, for me, I am ambitious, but I will tell you, anything that I promise, we will do. And that's where, again, I need your help, because it's a winning message. We will win this, but only with your help. So thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Going back to the gun issue, although I agree with you that mental health does have a play in that issue, my thing is it's only a portion of it, whereas I may not be articulating this correctly, but I think that if it's easy for an individual, and we were discussing this earlier, it's easy for an individual to actually be required to have a license, or it's easier to obtain an assault rifle than it is for a handgun, then there's something wrong with that picture. Because you're requiring a much higher standard to be able to purchase a handgun than it is for an assault rifle, which is a murder weapon. We use that in the military, you know, that makes no sense whatsoever. So if he was able to go into an institution or a gun store and be able to purchase an assault rifle at the age of 18, whereas you're required at 21, can't purchase purchase a handgun, there's something
Yeah,
wrong
no,
with that.
exactly,
So,
exactly. No, I mean, I couldn't agree
He
with you
bought
more.
10 rifles in the last year. 10
Yeah.
rifles he
Yeah.
bought
Right.
from that store.
Right. I mean, that's where there are a number of flags that were so clear about how someone needed to help this kid, someone needed to make sure that these arms weren't getting in his hands. And yet, time and time again, we didn't have the safeguards in place. And this is where these conversations, I actually think that we are starting to finally reach this turning point. And it's partly because these kids were in high school, right? They are actually, I mean, so Michelle Obama would always say that you actually literally have the power in your hand. Because your phone, she would say, don't just take a picture and tweet about what you had for lunch. Tweet about these kinds of issues, because you can change the discourse. And that's why I actually think we are starting to see kids, high school kids, march across the country. But that's where yes, they should be leading, but we gotta support them. And that's where I think that, you know, for me, I'm gonna be, if you go to the Facebook page, we're already starting to post about, you know, the marches happening and saying we will be there. Please march with us side by side, because we can affect the changes that we need to see here in Maryland and across the country.
Well, in 2020, mostly all of them will be voters.
Yeah. Well, and this is where, you know, I'm going across the state to not just college campuses, but to high schools. Because this is where, you know, when I was at Woodlawn High School and I talked to the kids, I said, you know, who here cares about well-paying jobs? Who here cares about, you know, ability to access Maryland schools? Who here cares about student loans, right? One of the things I want to see is 1% student loans, because no one should be profiting off student loans. I came out of school with hundreds of thousands of debt, right? I mean, yet that's the position we put our kids in. No parent wants to see their kid in that position. And that's where I just think that there are some real opportunities. But then when I asked the question, who here had paid attention to, it was the November election, it was the day after. 5 out of 250 kids raised their hand, even though every single one raised their hand when I talked about the issues. And that's where there is still this divide between policies and programs and politics. We need to stop making politics and politicians a dirty word. And that's where I think that there is a virtue to having, you know, what the Obamas taught me, which is a new generation of leadership with a clear vision can change the world. My goal is a little bit less ambitious in the sense that I'm just trying to change Maryland. But I believe we do have this moment, and it can be historic, because it's not just about 2018, but it's about 2020 and about every election going forward, where we could bring in everyone who is sick of politics, as they are right now, because we can change it.
Let me ask you this question. So if people wanted to volunteer, if they wanted to canvass, march, donate, or whatever, you know, universal things they can do to help your campaign, what would they do? How do they get in contact? How do they do that?
Okay.
And you have a marvelous staff person, so I'm sure.
Yes, thank you,
Because
exactly.
staff people work really, really hard. So there's a sign-up sheet back there, okay.
Yep, so Liz has a sign-up sheet. The website is krishformaryland.com or krishforgovernor.com. We also have Twitter, Facebook, as well as Instagram. Though being Michelle Obama's policy director, I certainly had to become a little bit more media savvy and cooler and hipper than I naturally am. Even though I obviously, I think, probably look like I should be, you know, hipping in with what the kids are doing these days. I'm actually, I'm as old as Nikki Haley was when she got elected governor of South Carolina, and so I figure if they can do it down there, we can do it here. But really, you know, please amplify the message, please volunteer, because we need to hear your voices, and they need to be a part of our campaign, because it is not about me, it is about us.
We got one more question here.
I like everything that you said you want to do. The question that I want to ask is, how are you going to pay for the things that need to be paid for?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I will tell you, you know, because there are going to be some folks who come in here and they're going to say, I'm going to provide free college education, free health care, and that's a $12 billion sentence. I wish I could promise you that. I want us to get there. I want us to think about a single payer system, but the reality is that part of what I want to do is provide a public option on the current exchange system, because that's how we could do that overnight. We could provide an affordable, cost-competitive option that provides all of the benefits of any other program, so that we can make sure the private insurers also have to get there because they're competing with the public option. But for me, what I will tell you is all of my policies are paid for, because I don't announce it until I figure out how we can. So, you know, part of why I said universal pre-K, right, for 4-year-olds. I want to get to 3-year-olds. But right now, I know that I can afford it for 4-year-olds. And part of how we do that is we figure out what are the smartest investments we can make. That pays for itself. So for every dollar we invest in universal pre-K, between K and 12th grade, we get a return of $19 on that investment. And then after that kid graduates from high school, we get another $19. Meaning that in costs that we save, it's basically for every dollar invested, $38 of return in investment. And that's where it's a no-brainer in the sense that we've seen public-private partnerships in other cities across the country that could come in and help us out here. So the Barr Foundation helps pay for it in Boston. The Penn Foundation helps pay for it in Philadelphia. The Gates Foundation helps pay for it across the country. And yet none of those foundations are here in Maryland. And this is where, you know, I learned as Michelle Obama's policy director, you had to be a little bit scrappy. Because though it's funny to say, Michelle Obama was not a U.S. government employee. And so when we got our programs done, when we got Let's Move, Reach Higher, Joining Forces, I know we've got at least one veteran here, it was always about public-private partnerships. Because in 2018, we can do that. We can be innovative. But part of what I also look for are the programs that I can help get the private sector involved with. So when I talked about free community college, the number of employers who come to me and say, I would pay for that. We've had across the country people in Pittsburgh, in Kalamazoo. There are private employers who are helping fund community college because they know that that is their pipeline in terms of employees. And so for many of these programs, we're actually going to be doing it through public-private partnerships. But part of it is also going to be allocations. Because as I said, the way we prioritize our budget is a reflection of what we believe is an important investment. I mentioned how we spend about as much on prisons and policing as we do on higher education. We spend twice as much on roads as we do on transit. There's no reason why the red line should have been taken off. It was a no-brainer. 250,000 jobs would have been accessed because we would have been allowing people to find a way to get to those jobs. That's personal for me. When my family first moved to Maryland, and I was 9 months old, my dad, we didn't have a car, so my dad would hop on a bus on Route 40, and he would go from our apartment to his high school. And if we didn't have that public transit option, you would have had a family of 4 on welfare instead, right? That is what public transportation, that is what these kinds of investments mean. They are not just a line on a budget. They are that gateway of opportunity. And so that's where, for me, I am very strategic because what it's sort of a simple phrase, but for me, the decision-making is just evidence-based. So in terms of Amazon, right? I will only provide for those kinds of tax incentives and investments in infrastructure if I can guarantee that that business is going to stay in state and provide well-paying jobs so that I can make sure that we are not just giving them a little write-off, right?
Right.
All right. Thank you so much. Remember to sign up, those that are here. It's not easy to run for office, and I really, it's not easy to say here, listen, but I really appreciate, I'm with Krish, I'm gonna call you all.
No, Krish, you got it, you got it.
I appreciate you coming today, and you can obviously take as much time as you need, because I'm about to close out the meeting. I want to thank all of you guys for coming on Monday nights, regulars, the newbies, and all that kind of stuff here. I think you had a really good opportunity. One of the things I'm really proud of is that we get candidates to come out, and Krish's candidacy is one that, you know, is arising. So it's not one that people all said, oh yeah, I know who this person is, and we're gonna have that person here. But I think that having her here was really enlightening. And we're gonna take the videos and we're gonna show it up, and we're gonna make sure all our indivisible TWW and other people have the opportunity to make sure that they've seen and heard you, and hopefully get you back here in Harford County for some other events in the future. So thank you so much for coming. I don't have, cause we're gonna pass a basket because we need to raise some money, because I don't have nothing to give these people. No, just kidding. We also had a budget, but we're gonna pass a basket to raise some money because it did take some money to have the candidate forum that we did have 2 weeks ago at Ames, where we had Senator Cardin and all that kind of stuff come in, and so we're running a negative now in our budget. That being said, thank everybody for coming. There is a sign-up sheet. I want to make sure you sign that. New business next month. We'll have another wonderful candidate come and speak with us. It's going to be let down. But things that need to be done. Please sign up. Please follow the emails. Please tell your friends and neighbors about what we're doing here at AADEMS. We have 3 candidates here that came out. And I see they're all like an L right there. We have a candidate for state attorney. We have Ms. Benn, district, whatever that is.
34A.
34, okay.
State delegate.
State delegate 43.
Yeah.
And we have DION, Mr. Guthrie here, who is running for what district?
District A.
District A.
Which is here.
Which is,
This
Right here.
and we have DIANE-TOBIN here,
Yep.
Running for circuit court judge.
running for
We
circuit
need
court.
a new judge.
Mr. Robinson too.
Oh, Mr.
Mr.
Oh,
Johnson,
yes,
Yeah.
School board.
School board.
We're all here.
okay, look, next time I'm just gonna say, people running for
Raise
office,
your hand.
stand
He's
there.
just saying not to worry about it right now because nobody's running against him.
I'm not mad at him.
Just hold on.
Oh, yeah.
You got a day or
Got a
two.
couple
Um,
of, one more week.
So, and I want to thank Diane for coming. You guys need to pay attention to the state attorney and judicial races. For some reason, judges are elected for 15 years here, and so once you get them, you can't get rid of them. No, just kidding.
You ain't kidding me. Say the
Yeah,
truth.
all right. I love all the judges here. That being said, though, you know, the rubber meets the road locally.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I've been bringing the, you know, one of the reasons why I like bringing the gubernatorial candidates in and the federal and one-day national candidates in is because it's easier for me because I don't have to say, okay, it's not like I'm taking a side, this candidate or that candidate. It's good to have multiple people running for offices locally. The decisions that, like, what your bond is going to be, how hard you're going to prosecute a case, what zoning issue is going to have, what's going to be transportation, education meets the road
Healthcare.
locally. So we have to pay attention all the way up, and it's good to have stars, but we need to have pay attention. Well, you guys are stars too. I love
I'm
you.
a rock star.
Rock star.
Praise the Lord.
We have to pay attention up and down the ballot. But it's not you guys, it's the 6, it's the 10 friends, neighbors, and other people that you can influence. So please, let's get to work. We want to get caught flat-footed like we did in November 2016. Okay? That being said, God bless everybody. Thank you. A couple people stand by and help me put the chairs up. Thank you. You're doing wonderful. Please give us a call.
I didn't mean to step.